My today's guest, Olivier Busquet, is not only considered as an incredible beast at the tables. He has been very successful in his career. He has over 9 million in cashes in live tournaments, but he has also been very successful online. But what inspired me the most is his approach to, or his holistic approach to poker. He's paying attention to his mental well-being, to his physical shape. He looks like a beast. He's now getting close to the 40s, and when you look at his physical shape, it's just mind blowing. So I have a lot of respect the way he is approaching poker, and he understands the importance of these areas and not just focusing on studying and fighting tilt. And this is something I've been always looking up to. And today he's my guest, and we're going to be talking, of course, about what it needs to be successful in poker, what it needs to be dealing with the emotional roller coasters, and about his challenge with JC Alvarado, his MMA fight that I found incredible, inspiring. And you might see me being a little nervous here because, of course, when you have someone at the podcast that you would consider as a role model, it's definitely a challenge. So bear with me, and I hope you enjoy the episode. And then drop a comment if you want to elaborate on something, or if you have a question. And now enjoy the episode. All right, we are live. I have to admit, I'm a little nervous because today I have someone on the podcast that I would consider as a role model, not only poker, but also in terms of nutrition, fitness. I mean, you're posting some incredible stuff on Twitter. And yeah, so not only for your success in poker, but also what you've accomplished outside of it, creating content, your podcast, Two Lives with Olivier, that I highly recommend checking out, your challenges, your bets. You have accomplished so much. And thank you so much for taking the time and joining me here today. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure. That was quite the intro. I don't know how I'm going to live up to that.
No, I'm dead serious. I've been following you now for a while, and your insights, even though they might be so straightforward, but very often in a world of complexity and doing more, and you sometimes forget about the simple things, and really has helped me. We can talk about that later, how in detail it has helped me. But to our viewers, I think the most important question: how did you get into poker? How did it all started with you when you got into poker?
Sure. So I think one thing to remember for people is that it was a long time ago, and the poker world was completely different. So I mean, I'll be 39 in 2 months, and I've been playing poker for 16 years. So yeah, when I was like 23, I was working in finance. I was working at a hedge fund, and there was this idea that trading and poker required some of the same skills, and so I wanted to learn poker to try to develop skills for trading and to try to
for trading. Yeah. Did you say trading?
Yeah, okay. Trading. Yeah, I was working at a hedge fund, not in a trading capacity, but in a support capacity.
Okay.
And I wanted to kind of transition into trading. So I thought if I could kind of develop a kind of resume of skills, it would be easier to convince the people at the firm to give me a shot at trading or working on a desk. And so the head of the firm and some of the guys at the firm, they liked poker. And so I kind of started getting into it a little bit, and I started playing online a little bit, but again, like nobody knew how to play poker at the time. So if you were, you had some intelligence. I had played chess as a kid, and I picked up enough to be able to be at least somewhat competitive and have fun. And then I got completely consumed by poker in a pretty unhealthy way, got really addicted to playing and thinking about it all the time. I ended up playing at work, getting fired from my job for playing online poker at work. And then I was left with an enormous amount of free time. that I dedicated to just playing poker all the time. I mean, there was a period of time in which I was playing and trying to learn while I had a job. That lasted for months. But eventually it just kind of overtook so much of my free time that it bled into my work time, especially because my job wasn't that challenging. And then, when I wasn't working anymore and just playing poker, then it was just like full time all the time. And I spent a few years, the early years of my career, in a very unbalanced way, playing probably close to 100-hour weeks of poker. Like literally falling asleep with my laptop in my bed, waking up, first thing I do, turn it on, sit in the game, start to play, just like not even thinking about how my life was going, just kind of just completely all in on just playing all the time.
Interesting. So if you look back today, was it more that the competitive aspects that you can battle with others and then trying to be better? Was this the key factor that, caused this addiction, or was it more the money that was involved, or maybe something else?
Yeah, I think it's like these types of things are kind of overdetermined, right? There's multiple causes, and I think for me, there was a number of things. Definitely the competitiveness was big. The money was also great, and a constant like motivator. But then there was also some other stuff going on. I mean, when I was a young man, I had a lot of anger. I didn't have a ton of sense for how I wanted my life to go or what direction I wanted to structure my life in, and I was a bit lost.
Yeah.
And poker was a way. I was also, when I first found poker, I guess I haven't really talked about this that much, and I'm not sure how relevant it is, but I assume it's relevant in some way. But when I first found poker, it was almost exactly overlapping the time that my parents got divorced.
Okay.
And so maybe it was a way of trying to escape a kind of something that I didn't want to deal with as much. And I think for people who have gotten really, really into poker or a number of other things that can serve the same function, I think there's definitely a kind of psychological functionality that it serves as an escape. It's like I'm completely immersed. I'm just completely consumed. I don't have to think or worry about anything else. I'm just I'm completely in it.
Yeah.
And that's addiction is you put it in quotes when you said it, and I understand why, because it's a charged word. It's a dramatic word to use, but at the same time, I felt a kind of consuming experience, and that is itself like, again, addictive, but like it's great. Like I loved it. It's you get to experience flow. You get to, like, everything else falls by the wayside. And so I really did love poker, and I continue to love the game, love the combination of the intellectual, the psychological, the emotional challenges that it presents. So I really enjoyed it. But when I say addiction, or what the reason that I use that word was because I felt like at the time I wasn't living deliberately.
Okay.
I wasn't consciously making choices. Okay, I want to dedicate this amount of time to poker, or I want to like focus my life in this way, or I felt like it was something that I didn't have a lot of control over, that I wasn't living deliberately with, and then that it would create some real problems that I wasn't resolving in the best way. So it would kind of feed anger that I had. It would make me isolate myself socially much more than I wanted to. And so that's what I mean by addiction, that it was like creating personal issues that I wasn't able to like healthily resolve. And instead I just put all of myself into poker instead. So obviously, like, over time I got much better at it, and I like grew up a little bit. But that's why I use that word, not because it was like some physical thing that I couldn't stop, but just because I felt like it was creating personal issues for me that I wasn't resolving or dealing with in the best way.
So it was basically poker was above everything, highest priority 24/7, and then everything else was secondary.
Yeah, like I remember, just as a random example, like there was one Christmas where I was with my family, and I ended up, I didn't ruin the Christmas, but I ended up just like playing poker for no reason as I'm just kind of waiting for, it was like you have some downtime sometimes in the morning on Christmas morning, at least in my family, like before we eat or before we exchange presents. And I decided to play a little bit of poker, and I got consumed in a session, lost some money, and then it just kind of like, I remember just not enjoying Christmas in the same way. And like, that's so dumb, that's just so ridiculous and nonsensical. And that's the kind of thing that poker served in my life for the first few years. Eventually I got over it and I created a much healthier balance, but that was my first experience with it.
Do you think that if it wouldn't have been poker, that there would have been something else that would have consumed you in the same way and would have made you addicted? Let's say you would have gotten into fitness, or maybe more professionally into MMA or something else, maybe something that was the challenge that you had to face and that you had to cope with and you had to overcome to maybe detect this kind of all in one thing.
I think counterfactuals are always very difficult. Trying to go back in time and think about how things would have been. I do have the kind of personality that gets very, very into things.
Yeah.
I am 100% like that. I was like that with video games or with sports. I am completely like that. And so I wouldn't have been surprised if something else if I had directed my attention in something else in a similar way. I think there was almost no chance it would have been something very negative, like, let's say, drugs or alcohol or something. I had really never had any real temptation or interest in that. Fitness definitely is a possibility. But I think it's more likely it would have been something related to whatever I was doing for a job. Or for, if I think part of the reason that poker was so interesting to me was that what I was doing for a job was not interesting to me at the time. And so if I was able to find something else professionally that I was really interested in, I think I probably would have put a lot of myself into whatever that thing was.
I see. You mentioned video games. What was going on with video games and sports? Like, what kind of sports and video games were you playing before you got into poker? Was it also professionally?
No, this was, this is when I was a teenager. I used to play video games just for fun, as a normal teenager does, but I would just play them a lot. I would play them a lot. Sports, I played basketball, I ran track, I played some tennis, but never on a team. I ran cross country, I played soccer, I skied. I always loved playing sports, but nothing ever completely captured me the way poker did. And also, it's very different because poker also, I found poker at the exact time, basically, that I was on my own, right? So I lived at home after, I was in high school, I lived at home, then I was in college. And again, there's like college, even though you have freedom, there's still structure. And then after college, I moved back home because my parents lived in Manhattan and allowed me to live with them for a couple of years to save money and to whatever. And that was a great opportunity for me. So I was living at home when I first found poker, and eventually I moved out, but that was pretty early in my poker career. And then not having a job, living on my own, that complete lack of structure, I think, also is what created the possibility for something to be very consuming. Otherwise, I always had structure sometimes can build in balance because it forces you to live, according to whatever, some kind of skeletal design that's a bit different. When you have complete and total freedom, this is what I think one of the big challenges of playing poker for a living is having, people oftentimes talk about it as one of the benefits, and I think it is one of the great aspects of playing poker for a living is you have freedom, you have autonomy, you can structure your own life, you don't have a boss or an alarm clock, you don't answer to anyone necessarily, and that's freeing, and that's amazing. Yeah. But I think there is a flip side to that, which is that structure for many people is it's securing, it's stabilizing, and it allows them to not have to worry so much, right? Like for me personally, like I have to organize and structure my day every single day. Yeah. And I've gotten good at doing that, but that took some cognitive and emotional resources. And when I'm not, when I'm tired or I'm tilted or whatever's going on, if that structure is not really in place and it falls apart, then that can snowball and have some kind of negative effects that that go down the line, and then whatever that can create issues.
Yeah. Do you think that I don't know where it comes from, because I've seen similar patterns with money or freedom, whatever it is, that people believe once I achieve XYZ amount of money, once I achieve that freedom, and then they do, but actually everything falls apart. They feel miserable, or they don't experience that level of happiness they would have perceived that it would bring them. Why do you think is that, that people don't take that step further and then maybe think about, okay, what am I going to do with my freedom? What am I going to do with all the time? What am I going to do with the money? Like,
there's a lot wrapped up in that question, actually. On one level, I think a lot of people, myself included, make the mistake of living in a fantastical future, fantasizing about something they want, thinking that what they're doing now is they're just doing it to get to this point in the future, or to achieve these, whatever it is, if it's money or a promotion or whatever it is. And it's like, I'm not living for right now, I'm living for this fantasy that I can imagine. And then even when they actually get the thing that they want, it doesn't create the feeling that they want. And it's not because they haven't planned necessarily correctly or whatever, it's just because they're always living for the future. And so what happens is when they get that thing, well, now they end up pushing something else into the future and trying to wait for that to happen or aspire to that. And I think also a lot of people, this is actually this human psychological dynamic, which I'm about to describe, is something that affects me all the time in poker, which is that we adjust so naturally and so quickly to the new normal. So it's like this is a problem that that I have sometimes with my sessions. It's like, and I think people have talked about this a lot, but it's like, if I win 10,000 and then lose 6,000 in a single session, and I win 4,000, a lot of times I don't particularly feel great, right? And it's like, if you just asked me at the beginning, you won 4,000 this session, that's great, right? But it's because I've adjusted to the 10, and now my point of view is, well, I just lost 6. And so all of it is about adjusting your expectations relative to where you're at. And it's like, the same thing is true in tournaments. Part of the reason people get 4th in a tournament and then they're disappointed is because once there's 4 people left, you're like, oh, I locked up 4th place money. That's now the worst I can do.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, okay, if you get 4th, oh, you did the worst you could do. But it's like relative to that new situation. And so I think that's another thing that happens is we adjust. And there have been studies too of happiness studies. I've heard some this particular study has been questioned a little bit, but I've seen studies where they compared the happiness of lottery winners to people who got into accidents and became handicapped or paralyzed, like paraplegics, I think. And after a year after that singular event, winning the lottery or having the accident, happiness levels of people were not necessarily, I think, equal to each other, but they were equal to what they were before. Okay. So it's like your happiness level has a kind of baseline. And it's like, as things happen, like good or bad things, it doesn't, after a little while, it doesn't really change your happiness level. There's a little bit of an anchoring to that. So I think that's part of it too. I think you're right, though, that people also make the mistake of just not planning particularly well. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, make this amount of money, and then the part of what motivates them, part of what pushes them is that goal that they've set for themselves. So they work hard, they do what they need to do, they achieve that goal, and then they're happy, and maybe there's a little honeymoon period. But then I think for people to be happy, they need purpose, they need drive. And if you don't have continuing drive, if you don't have more goals to achieve, if there isn't anything pushing you, then you feel a kind of emptiness.
It dies.
I've always been curious about people who kind of people who kind of make it out of the poker world, right? People who succeed, win a lot of money, oftentimes in the context of live tournaments, because you can make so much more than your EV is, and nobody's EV is that high. But in live tournaments, you can exceed your EV so dramatically. And so in a couple of years, especially if you start to play big tournaments, you can make a few $1 million or more, and then it's like, okay, now going back and grinding $100 tournaments or small cash games, that doesn't seem interesting at all. And so it's like, okay, I don't really want to play poker, and financially I feel secure. And so then the next question is, well, now what? And I think if you don't have a good answer to now what, you can struggle a little bit to find purpose and meaning and direction. And that, it's weird because it's like most people can look to that and be like, oh, that's what I want. That's the life I want, or that's the end point that I want.
Yeah.
But there's not necessarily any end point to it. There's end point is like, if it's the end, then then what drives you, I guess.
Yeah, I also believe that very often people try to solve or they connect all their problems with the potential money they make in poker, right? They're in debt or they have any other problems, and they think, oh, the money I can make with poker, I can resolve those problems. So I feel like that this already creates a huge emotional burden, because if you have a bad session, then you attach that, oh, I never get out of debt, or I will never be able to make this travel, or I will never be able to build this house, right? They bring already so many emotions into the game that it kind of, I don't want to say it already guarantees failure, but it makes it so much harder. How did you manage to not attach yourself to the outcome, right? We always talk about we don't want to be outcome dependent in poker, right? Or results orientated. Was it something that felt naturally for you right from the start, or is it something that you also struggled with?
No, it definitely was not natural for me, and like I've definitely made the exact mistakes you're describing, like for sure.
Okay.
Like just as an example, I've long struggled with anger. Like when I was younger, I had a lot of it. Now I have some, but much less. But I have definitely taken the point of view of like, well, some of my anger comes from the fact that I've made a lot of money in poker and then got a little bit unlucky in certain situations, made some bad decisions in other situations. And now I feel like I have much less than I should if I had been responsible and if I hadn't run into some bad luck. And so I think to myself, or I've thought to myself in the past, okay, well, a year from now or 2 years from now, when I've made more money, that will help like alleviate some of these anger that I deal with. And then a year later, it's like, okay, well, I did make a bunch more money. I'm not like super rich, but I'm in a different and better situation than I was then. How much better is my anger now? It's not clear. So I think you're right that people do that. I think I've done that for sure. And I can't give some like step-by-step guide to how to fix that. I think first of all, I've talked about this a little bit on my podcast, but I think there is some just natural dispositional variance to how people deal with some of the emotional struggles of poker. I think some people they're just better at it. Just the way some people take to strategy much easier, just much more natural for them. They just kind of get it much faster. The emotional part of poker, I think, is a separate part of it, but I think there's a similar dynamic that some people are just better at it. They're either just more stable, they don't feel things as much, they don't make some of these kind of false connections in their mind the way you're describing. And so I definitely struggled with that. I'm much better than I was, and the ways that I've gotten better, some are kind of basic. So like just making sure that I take care of myself, making sure I sleep, that I eat well, I fast on a regular basis, I try to meditate, I exercise consistently, but just taking care of myself to make sure that I'm in the best headspace, that I'm maximizing my own physical and mental potential. And that helps me be more clear-minded, that helps me live more deliberately, that helps me create a bit of perspective, because that's sometimes what's lacking, at least for me, is perspective, right? Sometimes I'm like really reactive to things, as opposed to taking some time and getting a kind of distant perspective to say, like I used to have a sticky note on my computer. I used to have a few of them, and one of them said, did what just happened actually change anything? And the answer is almost always no, right? And so if that's true, if like what just happened, you lose 10K or you whatever happens, if that actually didn't change anything, then should you really be so like, should you care so much? You know what I mean? Like no, presumably no. So like, that's one. I think two, another thing that I have found that helps me is just self-talk, is just Like one thing that I've struggled with is the voice inside my head. There's a guy, Dan Harris, I think his name is, and he has a book and an app called 10% Happier, which is like a meditation based app and book. And I was listening to an interview with him, and he said that the alternate title for his book that the publisher didn't end up choosing because they chose 10% Happier, the alternate title was "The Voice Inside My Head is an Asshole." And I remember when he said that, I just like, that resonated with me so profoundly. I was like, oh my God. I was like, the voice inside my head is such an asshole. And I was like, so sometimes I feel like I'm struggling with the kind of aspirational sense of who I am, like the person I want to be, that I aspire to be, and that I am when I'm at my best. And I feel like there's a struggle or a conflict sometimes with the voice inside my head that is sometimes very cynical or very negative or just mean-spirited or toxic. And so I try to literally sometimes have conversations where it's like I'm pretending that my inner voice is actually my friend, someone I care about. And I'm trying to deal with that person, give them advice, or talk to them in a way that is compassionate, that is loving, but that is assertive, and that says like, okay, no, that's not helpful, that's counterproductive, that's leading us into a path that's gonna like create issues, or that is, we are not gonna live as joyful a life as we want to if this is the point of view, or this is the lens through which we see the world, or we see this person, or we understand poker. I think so much of our experience is based on the lens through which we see the world, how we frame things. We have, so much of our experience is subjective, and we have to, on some level, or this is how I feel about myself, I have to take responsibility for the frame with which I apply interpreting the world, people, situations. And so I try to do that by resolving this sometimes conflict between my inner voice and my aspirational self. And that is a work in progress. And over time, I've gotten much better at it. But there are times where that negative inner voice can dominate, and I continue to try to work on that.
Yeah. The title, by the way, I didn't read that book, but I have it here. It's always good. Have books at home, but don't read them.
I got plenty of those.
Yeah, me too. But I really like the title, just the title, because also so often we strive for this end goal, 100% happiness. But at the end of the day, whatever you do, it makes it a little better, from time to time. But the problem is something that might get better. After several months, other problems will occur. You meet other people that will bring up different emotions that you haven't experienced before. I don't know which book I read it. It's a very trivial example, but I really like it. It's you choose the problems you want to have in your life, right? And this is also where I realized for myself, this makes me happy when I can choose the problems that I want to have in my life, right? Whether it's with RaiseYourEdge, with the business, with poker, downswings, I signed up for it. Internet disconnection. I had a guy messaging me, hey Ben, what can I do against tilting when my internet connection gets lost? And I told him, listen, the first thing that you signed up for it, this mindset of understanding, you opted in. You choose to have internet connection. It's not PokerStars problems or party poker. When you do something online, it can always happen. It's like having a car accident. Shit can happen, right? Some problems are bigger, some problems are minor. This has really helped me, this mindset of, okay, it's going to make it better, 5%, 10%. But at the end of the day, other problems will come. So, at some point, I was also striving for, I remember writing in my book, okay, I'm going to fix all these problems. I'm going to get rid of them. And then I've solved life. But it's not like that.
When you say writing in your book, what do you mean? Is that do you keep a journal or a diary?
Yeah. I have it's called Klarheit. It's a German company, but it's also available in English, and it has three different sections. The first section is some sort of self-reflection on a larger scale for the year, for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and then you write down what you want to accomplish, your goals. It also asks you very, I don't want to say painful questions, but you have to think about it. Like, okay, how does it feel when you achieve this goal? What are the steps you have to take? What people you need to surround yourself with? It's a couple of pages, and then you have on a monthly basis always a preview, a review, and then also weekly basis. This is basically, I'm old school. I like this kind of stuff, writing it down, my to-do list for the day.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Actually.
I have recommended a lot to my friends, and most of them are using it.
I've always like heard that journaling or that, you know, some sort of writing reflection is really good on a personal basis.
Yeah.
But the way you're describing it, that it has a kind of structure to itself.
Yeah.
Because for me, part of the issue for me was that how open-ended it was.
Yeah.
Just like, what do I write and how do I do it? And obviously if I just did it every day, I'd probably get a sense for it. But having some structure the way you're describing sounds great. Yeah.
And also in a lot of the books, they recommend, okay, you have to do this exercise. But when you read a lot, it's a lot of work. Like, you only have a limited amount of time, right? They propose some exercises, some homework. Okay. I remember, what was this book called? Think and Grow Rich. Like, there are also a lot of exercise in every chapter. And then if you read one or two books a month, that's a lot of exercises. And a lot of, also if you work out and if you meditate. And then I realized that a lot of the stuff they want me to do is actually already covered by this book. So it's exactly the way you mentioned at the beginning. This structure, or this book provided me the structure I need. And
that's cool.
Yeah. So I can definitely recommend that a lot. And yeah, that was my
it sounded like poker chips.
That was they're at the end of my table, and they just.
That's great.
So books. Are you reading a lot yourself?
Not as much as I'd like. I do try to read at least a book or two a month. I've in the last year and a half, I've gotten really, really into chess, and so when I have free time, I'm oftentimes playing or watching or studying chess. So that has overtaken a little bit of my reading. Yeah. But I also really love it, so I don't mind as much. I used to spend a reasonable amount of time either reading or consuming current events as part of my kind of like, you know, overall routine. And especially since COVID, I find that to be much less interesting. So, I mean, I try to like understand what's happening with COVID, obviously, but beyond that, the last couple of months, I've dramatically reduced my kind of current events consumption. And so yeah, I've honestly, I've just been focusing much more on poker. It's a bizarre situation during this like very difficult time for so many people, for like me personally to like be doing quite well and to have such a great opportunity. I mean, you know, I live in New Jersey, and online poker in New Jersey it's just great. You know, it's just doing really well. And so I've really tried to focus on maximizing that opportunity while it's there.
What are you playing at the moment?
I only play cash games. I play a lot of 2-5, 5-10, 10-20, and a little bit of 25-50. But 25-50 doesn't run very much. 10-20 is
just
more
online in New Jersey. Is it? What sites operate? Is it America's Card Room or?
No. ACR is not like a legal regulated site. So you know, New Jersey has legal regulated poker. So it's PokerStars New Jersey, Party Poker New Jersey, and then WSOP is also combined with Nevada. Okay. But the last few months, I haven't even played on WSOP. Just New Jersey exclusive Party Poker and PokerStars. And the games are obviously small, but the win rates are big, and it's like, you can
it's going well for you.
Money. Yeah, it's going quite well. And also it's like it's been good for me to I mean, it's been a few years now, but it's been good for me to learn cash. Like that's really helped my poker understanding overall. Playing tournaments and then heads ups in goes in particular. I never really studied much, and I didn't feel like my theoretical understanding of poker was particularly high. And now I think it's reasonable. It's not super high. It's reasonable. But being forced into this new player pool and this new environment and this new format has really helped me.
Yeah. How do you study today with your 15 years of experience? Do you still study a lot? If you could give a rough number of your ratio study play?
I never studied until I moved to New Jersey. I'll be completely honest. I never used a HUD ever. I didn't even know what how Poker Tracker worked. I still don't really know how Poker Tracker works, to be honest. I've even recently paid someone to just like explain very, very basic stuff on Poker Tracker.
Okay.
So up until 3 or 4 years ago, I never studied any poker. I messaged a guy that I did not have a particularly like friendly history with, but I thought he was good. I messaged him and asked him if he would like give me some lessons in cash, like 4 years ago. And he was like, it was funny because he asked me this question. I remember one of the first questions he asked me. He was like, so how do you decide what you defend from the big blind? And I was like, I don't know. Like, how do I decide? I don't know. Like, I kind of have a sense for what hand is good enough, or I don't know. And he was like, okay. He was like, let's start there, you know? And he was like explaining to me like what equity was and how the difference between like all in and realizable equity and all this stuff. And this was like 4 years ago. I didn't even fucking know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So in the last 2 years, I've started to study more and more. And it's really in the last, let's say 6 months that I've started to study a lot more. So now I basically play, let's say, probably 35 or 40 hours a week. And then I study another probably 10 to 15. I watch some videos. I probably watch about 2-3 hours of videos a week. I watch them on like a relatively fast speed, so I get through a decent number of them. And then I don't think I'm the best studier, to be honest. When you asked me to be on this podcast, I listened to the last one you did with Pads, and Pads is, I don't know him that well, but I think he's phenomenal. I think he's an extremely good player, obviously, and just like a really well-intentioned, like good member of the community. I appreciate him.
Yeah.
And I think his conversation with you, which I highly recommend to people who have not listened to it, I thought was really insightful and really great. And his idea of, he was applying a lot of it to tournaments, but his idea of, I don't know if he phrased it exactly this way, but like ego studying is what I call it. People who kind of study for their ego. There's one guy I played actually quite recently, and it was like, to me, it was so obvious that he studies PO, and it was like, this guy clearly only puts in the biggest bet sizes into PO that he can. He's only trying to learn massive bet sizes. And I was like, that's like the kind of, that's like exactly the kind of thing that people do for their ego. And like, I do it too. Like, it was a wild when I was looking at PO before I started looking not just at the strategy tab, but the strategy plus EV tab. And like you look at all these like river calls and stuff, and it's like so many of them are just like negative or like barely making any chips. And it's like as soon as you tweak a few assumptions that you're making, it's just like, it's like you can just like ignore them completely. Or it's like you look at different bet sizes and then you compare the EV and it's like relatively marginal. And the idea of trying to execute these strategies that are so sophisticated. I mean, I've gone down some of these PO rabbit holes, and I've tried to do certain like kind of database analysis and trying to figure out what's going on. And, one thing that I think that is very, very difficult is to try to do this stuff on your own. And I think the superpower that so many very good players have is one another. And so this is, I think, one thing that's really great about RaiseYourEdge as an example is that you've created a community, and it's a community of people who are able to leverage the kind of collective network brain and improve by helping one another. And I think, for basically my entire poker career, including now, I've basically been by myself, trying to learn alone. And it is very, very difficult to do. Like just recently, I had one of my very good friends is Sam Grafton, who's quite a strong player, very, very good. I asked him if he would go over some poker stuff with me. I obviously paid him because he's an expert, and it's and I think it's appropriate. So I literally bought a lesson from one of my good friends, which was a funny thing to do, but he just like explained a couple things to me, and he did them quite casually because I don't think he realized how helpful they would be. And I was just blown away by this, like a couple things he said that were just like, I was like, oh, I never really thought of it like that. That's really interesting. And then I thought of a million different ways that I could use it and apply it. And this is one thing, like what I'm going to say might sound a bit arrogant, and maybe it is, and that's just the way that it is. But I think I'm actually very talented in the game. And so I don't need a lot of insight or a lot of studying to actually have quite a significant impact on the way I play and the way I think. So I think I can leverage like insight and knowledge like quite effectively. But I have to say that for the majority of my career, I have not I've not made enough of an effort, and I haven't learned to be efficient with studying, which I think is one of the things Pat's talked about. I think is very important. So like if you're gonna like study PO, for example, you probably should master node locking and like only look at node lock strategies, or not only, but for the most part, because it's just like nobody plays that way. And the thing is also, I think one thing people do is they, so much of the poker world is the super high rollers or the very best players being exposed, being highlighted.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, if you're going to play, at that level in those tournaments with the very best players, then you're probably like trying to approach a theoretical style is going to have more value. And you're probably going to be punished much more for having like significant deviations that are like somewhat transparent. But for the 99% of the poker world who are playing in considerably smaller stakes and weaker player pools,
and larger player pools now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, much larger player pools. Yeah. Then it's I think you basically just have to really, I think there's like four main things that people should focus on. Or what creates a baseline, a foundational win rate. And that is emotional control, managing your tilt.
Yeah.
Pre-flop discipline.
Oh yeah.
Value betting thin.
Yeah.
And overfolding rivers.
Yeah.
If you do those four things, I think you will win in almost every player pool that you're in. Like maybe at 2-5 zoom on stars, that strategy might lose a little bit. But maybe you need to be a bit more sophisticated and a bit higher level, and a bit more transparent, because or maybe you'll just break even. Maybe the good regs will beat you and you'll beat the fish and you'll be even with the weaker regs. Maybe you'll be a weaker reg. But in most player pools, I think if you're very good at those things, that's enough.
Yeah.
And I think you should direct your studying, your resources, your time to those things.
Yeah.
So, I don't even think that I am that good at taking that advice that I just gave. I think I'm actually very good at giving advice and only mediocre at taking it. But I think yeah, those four things are the foundation to just playing winning poker.
Yeah.
But if you do aspire to play at super high stakes and beat the best players, which I think most people who aspire to do that should really seriously think about why. They should really take some time, because I think for so many people it seems so natural, so obvious. Like that's the escalation. That's where you want to go. That's where, and it's like you really got to think about what part of you psychologically is pushing you in that direction. What makes you want to compete at that level or for those stakes or against those players, given all of the alternatives, given all of the different things? Because I think for many people, the answer will be ego. And, ego is a complicated thing. Obviously, everyone has an ego. My ego is as big as anyone's. And it has, I think, a lot of positive attributes. It's a big motivator. It's something that pushes me and that helps discipline me. And, there's some great aspects to it. But there's some negative aspects to it, too. And I think, like, if you just think about the variance level and the amount of time and resources and bankroll required to compete, to play for very high stakes, I think sometimes when people think about this type of aspiration, what they think about is being the best player or being the top 3 players. But like, let's just take, for example, the 30th best super high roller. Like, you're the 30th best guy.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is. First of all, he doesn't know who he is. Other people don't know who he is, right? There's such a lack of consistent feedback that, like, the guy who's actually 30th has either run really good, and so he thinks he's 15th, or he's run really bad, and him and everyone else thinks he's 50th or something, right? So like the amount of markup you can charge is somewhat dictated by how well you've run, right? And then like if you're, let's say, the 30th guy, you're playing in tournaments where there's at least 10 or 15 guys better than you in almost every tournament. So you're giving up edge to those guys. Yes, you're making it from some other people, but like the structures are shallow, the variance is high, you're probably only buying a relatively small percentage of yourself anyway. It's like, you know, when you calculate the numbers out, I think, and part of the reason I'm getting into this is because I saw one of the questions was, why don't I play super high rollers? And this is part of why, which is, you know, I think in the last few years, that segment of the poker world is the segment that has improved the most. And so it is the most competitive, most difficult to beat, like on a relative basis compared to 5 years ago, than any of the other segments of the poker world. And then, like I said, the structures are fast. I think, you know, almost everyone who plays super high roller tournaments, let's be real, they supplement them by playing relatively significant online schedules, right? I mean, it's like very few people just live off playing live tournaments, like big live tournaments. And that would be, I think, very difficult to do. And so I don't want to move from New Jersey, and the tournaments in New Jersey are quite small. So I'm very happy where I am. And I think, like right now, if I entered a super high roller field, I would be in the bottom tier of regs. And so I wouldn't even be profitable. I would have to study a lot to get to a point where I was profitable. I probably could never get to a point where I was in the top 10 or 20, maybe. Like those guys are just too good. Sorry, that was my phone. So, you know, one thing I've also managed to do in my career, like in two kind of obvious situations, is find a little bit of a niche, find a kind of partitioned environment, and try to dominate that environment. So in the beginning, it was heads up sit and goes. Now I live in New Jersey, and you know I'm probably one of the, if not the best regs in New Jersey. And like both of these environments have been talent capped. And I think, you know, for at least for me, and I think for many people, it's probably better to be a big fish in a small pond than a smaller fish in a bigger pond. And if you just think about it, like the bigger fish just, you know, I think some people underestimate how much of a winner take all dynamic there is to poker. Like if you're the best reg, if you're the best player in a game, like your win rate is significantly higher than everyone else's. Like if you're taking money from everyone in the game, like if you're the third best player in a 6-person game, like yes, you can make money depending on how weak the recreational players are or the other regs or whatever. But it's hard. I mean, you're trading money back and forth. You're being put in spots you're uncomfortable with, and it's and emotionally and psychologically, it's a drain. It's a real challenge. But if you're like the top dog, if you're like the best player or one of the best players in all the tables, in all the hands, in all the situations, you're constantly extracting EV from every situation you're in. It's a lot more profitable. Not to mention, it's a lot easier of an experience. Like if you have a higher win rate and lower, that's another thing. I think people focus a lot on just EV. Like, what is my EV in poker? How do I maximize or increase my EV? But there's another part of that, which is your variance, like the distribution of that EV, right? And it's like, if your EV is X and you can increase it to 2X, but your variance goes through the roof, like, is that worth it? You know, what if maybe you can increase it to 1.5X and lower your variance by going into another format or another game, lowering stakes, adding tables, studying the things that matter the most. I think sometimes they don't think of things strategically enough in that sense. And instead they're pushed, as I was for the majority of my career, they're pushed too much by their ego. I want to be the best. I want to be better than the best. And also I want to be exposed in the community, right? This is part of why people are constantly listing on Twitter their live or their tournament scores. Right? It's because they want recognition. They want validation. They want other people to see them as good, as like worthy. And you know, they want that. And I understand why people want that, but I just think you have to be careful about allowing that desire for external validation, for other people to think you're good, to push you in a direction that's not as good as another direction you could choose. That's a bit more low key, that's a bit more relaxed, where your win rates are higher, the players are weaker.
Yeah, it can be dangerous then, especially if you might be on a downswing, especially now in the age of social media. When I started, I don't know, 10 years, even 5 years ago, that was not a big thing, right? You had your scores, you shared it with your friends, and it was all good. And these days, and I can also see that myself, that you get these highs, these dopamine kicks, right? All this validation, all the likes and follows. And maybe then if you don't have it anymore, what's then? What's next, right? So you got to be careful about that and always understand. I mean, I'm not saying it's terrible, but it's your perspective that you have on it, that it's basically fake. That's not real, and it's also not very sustainable to chase for that. And I think it's also very often people that might be a little bit more lonely or are a little bit more susceptible for desperation, frustration, depending on their upbringing. And then, suddenly they get all this validation. They think, oh, it's awesome, it's great. Now I feel happy. And then it turns around and you don't have it anymore. It can be quite a deep hole that you fall into. So yeah, good that you brought it up, because it can be, social media in that sense can be quite dangerous, I believe.
Yeah, and tournaments are tricky.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's this focus on earnings, like I cashed for this, I cashed for that.
Yeah.
There's no focus on buy-ins. I mean, tournaments are hard. It's very difficult to get an accurate gauge of the variance in tournaments. It's tough. And the experience is hard. That's another thing too. I think, like when people compare cash to tournaments as an example, like the distribution of profits is very, very, very different, obviously, and that really colors your experience. So like if you're fine going through a lot of failure, a lot of losing, then you'd probably be okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I actually love tournaments. I love live tournaments. I really enjoy them, and I'm it's like not being able to play them is tough. Not being able to go to Vegas, the World Series. I love the World Series. It's so much fun. I really enjoy it. But I think part of the reason that I can enjoy it is because it's like a bonus supplement. Like I have a core grind, and this is something I do on the side. And if I don't run well, it doesn't really matter. So I'm not as dependent on it, and it's not as significant.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier this, when it comes to studying, the moment you make an adjustment, everything falls apart, right? A break-even spot might become terrible, and it's also so easy to tweak it ourselves. Sometimes we like to make up fantasy reasons to defend our plays, right? I'm just going to bluff a few more combos, and then my bluff catch becomes slightly profitable. What has helped me a lot, and I'm happy that you brought it up, and you also mentioned it earlier, is the assumptions you make, you can only make based on your experience, right? And the more people you surround yourself with, the better your judgment is going to be, because you get this feedback. They're going to tell you, okay, I think people are going to be bluffing less, or they're going to be bluffing more, or on this spot they're going to be raising tighter or looser. Then you get this feedback to make your own adjustments, which brings me to a very hot debate that is being discussed in every poker forum, I believe, is this GTO versus exploitative. When you also, since you used to play in higher environments, was it more that you really try to think about, okay, I need to defend my range, I need to have my certain frequencies, I need to randomize? Or was it more like, all right, in this spot, based on my experience, people are going to be under bluffing, so I'm going to make a tight fold? How do you approach especially those marginal situations when it's very easy to talk yourself into a light hero call, so you're not getting exploited, so to speak?
Well, I mean, like what I try to do to deal with those things is I do study a decent amount of theoretical poker. So I want to understand as best I can what the kind of theoretical foundational approach to a spot is, to a situation is. And then I think I have reasonably good intuition about how people deviate, and then what those deviations imply for what my response should be. So I mean, I think I'm pretty good at that. I'm not great at that. I think you have to be like really, really player. Like if you can be, you have to be really, really player specific. So when you play in tournaments, it's very difficult because you're a lot of times playing against people you don't know necessarily, or against random people. And I think like there's two types of exploits. right? There's the kind of general exploit, the player pool exploit. This is how a normal person or a normal rec or like a random person or on average, this is what people do. And then there's like specific player exploits. And some of those player exploits online are really based on Poker Tracker or HUDs, or they're really looking at exactly what they're doing. And that's something that like I'm, again, okay at, but not great. And thousands of people are better than me. But I think I can develop an intuitive sense for how people play just by playing with them. Just by playing with them for a while. And so it's like in Heads Up Sit and Goes and in New Jersey, the player pools are somewhat manageable. And so I end up playing with a lot of the same players a lot. And so I think I get a feel for how they play. And obviously, like not all spots are the same. Some people are dramatically underbluffing some spots. You know, some people are overbluffing some spots, but that's not as common. And I think, and also people are trying, you know, also there's like a certain segment of the reg pool that plays a kind of try to trick you poker, right? They're trying to use a lot of like recent dynamics, or I think he's thinking this, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And then obviously there's people who are just trying to ignore all of that kind of noise because they don't think they can see through it as well, or they think people are a bit overconfident in their ability to see what's going on, and they're trying to take a more balanced approach.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really say anything beyond I'm trying to do some combination of the two.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to trick people, but I do think recent dynamics can influence frequencies pretty significantly for some people and for some situations. But at the end of the day, I have over time become humbled enough to realize that like when you make mistakes in those types of situations, those mistakes can be very costly, and trying to be relatively balanced can kind of correct for some of those potential mistakes. So, I mean, I think environments can really vary. And so I try to be in tune with the environment that I'm in and try to make exploits based on the environment that I'm in, and just try to become a master of that. And like, if all of a sudden you transported me and now I'm playing like W coops or something, like it would take me some time, I think, to adjust, and I would play a bit more conservatively and try to be a bit more balanced until I had a better sense for how people were playing or how specific people were approaching spots.
Yeah. I mean,
and also, I also think for most of my career, I just really wasn't that good at this stuff.
Okay.
You know, the reason I was successful was because one, just people weren't that good. And so, I mean, you know, I wasn't as good, but other people weren't as good. And so my mistakes were harder for people to see and exploit, capitalize on.
Yeah.
And being competitive, having an intuitive sense for how people played and what a good response was oftentimes enough to win.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that is more what I relied on for the first, let's say, at least 10 years of my poker career. And you know, it's only more recent that it's become such a, you know, that people have gotten so much better and more thoughtful and really trying to analyze the game at such a high level.
Yeah.
And it's been fun to try to keep up and try to learn and stuff. But I'm not, you know, there are a lot of people who are much better at answering that question.
Why I love doing these podcasts is also always to see where this edge comes from that someone had, and you have achieved the top in poker. And you might say from yourself that you might not be the most theoretically profound player, but from my point of view, the way I see you in the podcast and the content that I've been consuming from you is that you actually, of course, we all have a big ego, right? But since you mentioned you don't play super high roller boards, I see one of the biggest reasons why people fail as well is they play in the wrong games. They cannot admit, okay, maybe I don't have such a high EV. I should play smaller games because I have a higher EV there. I think this is such a big skill that a lot of poker players lack. And also your work outside of the tables, right? Your diet, your nutrition, your meditation. You really have a structure outside of the poker tables that I think gives you such a huge edge over your competitors. And I'm always trying to emphasize on that, hey, it's not only on the poker tables. You also got to do a lot outside of the poker tables. Get your shit together. And this will also help you to perform better at the poker tables. And maybe you even need to study less. And very often doing less of something and doing more from something else or doing more of something else will actually be more effective for you. And just great to see that this way is working really well. All the effort you're putting in outside of the tables.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, like I do live in an incredibly structured life now.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I will plan out. What I used to do is I used to write out a schedule for the day, and it would be like in 30-minute increments. I mean, it would be like very detailed.
Okay.
And now I don't do that because I don't need to do that,
Yeah.
because I'm very structured. I almost never play longer than 3-hour sessions. I haven't been drunk in like 10 years. You know, like alcohol really messes with your sleep. And I think sleep is incredibly undervalued by everyone. Basically, sleep is so important. Yeah. And so, yeah, I am very structured and disciplined in terms of the way my life works. That's definitely true. I also think a lot of these types of questions are actually pretty specific to the individual, right? So it's like, I think like I have certain vulnerabilities. And so my biggest vulnerability is like emotional reactivity.
Okay.
Like I can tilt hard. And if I tilt, I can cost myself a lot of money. And so I'm constantly trying to prevent myself from the way I view it is that I have a threshold. And if my threshold gets like crossed, I can lose control a little bit and start to play poorly, and sometimes quite poorly. Like the kind of off the deep end, like absurdity is like, I almost never do that. I do that every once in a while, but very rarely. But what does happen sometimes is that I just play worse. I'm just like kind of shaky.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not like tight and like you know, really playing my best.
Yeah.
So let's say there's an A, B, and C game. So the first thing I've figured out how to do is really minimize how often I'm playing my C game. And so I focus a lot on some of these other things that influence my ability to sustain my A. That's for me personally, because I think it's one of my biggest vulnerabilities. At the same time, though, you know, you say you think a lot of people struggle because they let their ego put them in games that they can't beat, or that kind of thing. I also think there's a flip side to that. I'm sure that's true. I don't dispute that at all. But I think that there's also a flip side to that, which is, I think there are a lot of people who just never ever challenge themselves.
100%.
Who are just such like it's either part of their personality or it's their approach to poker, and like their approach to poker is, the only thing I'm interested in is maximal edge. And so if a game ever seems hard or competitive, I sit out, I leave. You see this actually a lot in New Jersey. A lot of the New Jersey regs, almost all of them, to be quite honest, like 99% of the regs, like are unwilling to play if there isn't a recreational there. And if the recreational isn't like pretty bad, like there will be guys who leave me with recs because the rec is not bad enough to play with.
Okay.
And then like there are almost never any games where regs play with where regs are just playing with each other, even though some regs are clearly stronger than others. And so there are guys who are passing up like EV spots like consistently.
Yeah, of course.
And then there are times, and I think it gets bad enough where there are like a recreational player is sitting and then they sit out for whatever reason. They're going to the bathrooms, like something happened. They sit out for 2 hands or for 5 minutes, and the table immediately sits out. And like that kind of bum hunting, I think is bad for the environment. I think I'm not a fan of that at all. I think I distinguish between game selecting and bum hunting. Game selecting is what a responsible poker player does, and bum hunting is what I think an egregious predatory poker player does. So I see that distinction. But I also think in terms of your development as a player, if you never challenge yourself, if you never put yourself in spots in which the games are a bit tougher than you're used to, or the competition is a bit higher, the level is a bit higher, then I think you stunt your growth and development as a player. I think that is an important part. Like, people can study as much as they want, but if you don't try to play against good players or in tougher situations, you're never going to develop your full potential. Now, I think some people might say, well, that's not really my interest. My interest is, can I make money from this game? How do I make the most money? And then poker is just a tool that I live the rest of my life in a happy way with the money that I make, and that's fine. But in general, I have the personality where I'm constantly trying to get the most out of me, trying to reach the highest level. I'm incredibly competitive and want to become not the best. See, this is another mistake, I think. Not a mistake. This is a way that I view things a bit differently from other people. I'm trying to become the best because the best is a relational term. I'm not trying to compare myself to others. As corny as it is, I'm trying to become the best that I can be. I'm trying to maximize my potential. Yeah. And my potential might be high enough that I'm better than most players, whatever, I'm not sure. But that's what my focus is. My focus is in getting the most out of my gifts, my talents, my abilities, who I am. If that ends up making me good but not great relative to other people, that's fine. If it makes me great but not the best, that's fine. You know what I mean? I've learned to accept that I can't do better than my best. Like, that's just not how it works. Yeah, so the only things I can control, I can focus on, are making myself the best version of me. And so that's what I try to do. I'm not always the best at it, but that's where my focus is when I'm deliberate and trying to think clearly.
Yeah.
What about you? What is your approach?
I used to be exactly the opposite. For me, it was always the very top.
How long has your career been? How long have you been?
I started in 2009 with sit and goes, 9-max sit and goes. Then Black Friday went to heads up 6-max hyper turbo sit and goes, and was always trying to be the best. And definitely, also shifted more towards I can only be as good as what I can do. Trying to be the best version of myself. And still, I have always been very competitive. I used to play football semi-professionally in Germany. I was born and raised in a very competitive way. So it was in my blood, and definitely had to learn to cope with it. And it definitely also went to an extent where I couldn't even take breaks, so to speak. When I was about to go to bed, I was wondering, okay, maybe there's something else I need to do. I really had a hard time, and I think I was also doing a lot of work with RYE, and so at some point then I started coping with that in a way that I changed my relationship to it, and also dealt with.
Ben, how old are you?
I'm 29.
Oh my God. So you were.
Sorry, I'm 31. Dude, I don't know why I was saying 29. I just got. I'm 30.
Well, maybe 2009.
I was just. I had the 2 and the 9. I'm 31. Yeah.
31. Okay, still. Okay, 31. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But you were quite young when you found poker.
Yeah, around the 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially when you're young and get into poker, I feel like it can mess around with you. So you got to look after. That's why I brought it up, man. It's not always about the strategies. It's very often it's so mentally challenging. It's so mentally challenging. I personally, whatever I did, I played video games almost professionally. I almost went to. I was on the verge to become a professional football player, and then a poker player. And I had to say, or whether it's school, college, like poker was the most mentally and emotionally challenging sport or game, however you want to call it, that I ever did. And I think it requires even more to look after your headspace, your mental and your physical state than everything else. Okay, I mean, if you take football, you have to be better, more in a better physical shape. But I think especially poker, the mental aspects are just so huge. And
if you play football, you're presumably part of a team.
Yeah,
you have coaches.
Yeah,
you have
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Tell you when to go to the gym, what to work. You know what I mean? That's another thing. Like, I assume, and I mean, I'm interested to hear what you think, but I assume that RaiseYourEdge, creating a community, and maybe even before that, just having a core group of poker friends was an important part of your development
100%.
and your experience.
Yeah.
I would assume that.
Well, it's was a group of people with Fedor Holt, Stefan Sondheimer, Rainer Kempe.
Those guys seem like they're pretty good.
Yeah, and we all started playing low stakes together, right? And then we got together, we pushed each other, we supported each other, and that's where I learned how important it is to have this group of people. And someone takes more the role of the coach who is trying to help everyone. Then someone has more the role of being more silent but also very supportive, and everyone has its role. And I also specialized in his formats. Stefan was playing cash games, Rainer was also playing a lot of sit and goes, and we could help each other with deeper stack size, shorter stack size, ICM, and we were just a team. We were actually a team, and that's when I started RaiseYourEdge, that I also wanted to give that to others, the opportunity to connect with like-minded people. Now in our Discord we have 20,000 people, so if someone is telling me I can't find a study partner, then
20,000 people.
Yeah, we have almost 20,000 people in Discord. Yeah,
that's sick, man. Yeah. That's awesome.
We have groups for cash game, tournaments, sit and goes. We talk about food, about everything, about travel, and if you have that group of people, man, nothing can stop you. And yeah, of course, it's about poker, but there's so much more to that.
It's about community. It's about community.
Yeah.
I mean, the word community, I think, is really powerful. And if you can develop it and build it, it's great. Yeah,
you brought that up with challenging yourself, and I think even if you don't want to challenge yourself in poker, just say, hey, I just want to make some money, I don't care. But I think you should at least challenge yourself somewhere else, right? Whether it's in sports or maybe profession or your relationships. I think it's very, very important to have that challenge. And that what something really inspired me was your bet with JC Alvarado, the fight. Man, what was your motivation? When did it start? When was the seed planted? I want to do that, and why?
Well,
for those, sorry to interrupt you, guys. For everyone who's not familiar, we're gonna put a YouTube video of explains a bit the story behind the bet. Maybe you can just briefly summarize what was this bet about.
So this happened a few years ago. It actually came right on the heels of my divorce, and so I was in a place where I was, divorces are traumatic and they're different for different people. But like, I was going from envisioning my life as we to envisioning it as just me. Right. And that's a very different frame to apply to your life. And so when it was just me, one of the questions I had for myself was, well, what does that mean? Like, how is that going to look different? What is the path that I'm going to take and go down? And so I think I was a bit more open-minded to a kind of character building, challenging path to pursue. And this idea came up. It was a bit random. I was training with a trainer at a gym, and he was a former MMA fighter, and he told me that he could teach me how to fight, and I thought that was interesting. And then just the idea of like betting in the poker world as a way to motivate yourself, has always been a little bit of a thing. People have done it obviously to lose weight, and to motivate themselves to do different things. I also always thought that the poker community would undervalue my kind of athletic or physical potential. I was, when I first got into poker, I was like pretty skinny. I had long hair and a French name, and I had always been very athletic, but I just didn't think people identified me with that as much. So I thought that I would have a chance to get like a good deal or a good price or a good situation in a general athletic bet, just whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then this idea came up in my head, and I just kind of put a feeler out on Twitter. I said, is anybody interested in booking a 6-figure MMA bet? I'm looking for motivation to train. And when I first put that tweet out, I have to be completely honest, I was just playing with the idea. I was not committed. I didn't know for sure I wanted to do it. I had zero training. I was just kind of playing with the idea. And within 10 minutes, Steve O'Dwyer had said, paging JC Alvarado, they're good friends. And JC, I knew JC casually as in the poker world, but I didn't know that he had this huge passion for MMA, that he had a similar bet with Andrew Roble that never got to the fight part, and that he was kind of hungry for this experience.
But he already had some MMA experience, but you didn't, right?
He had not had competitive experience, but he had some training. He was like a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He had done some kickboxing or Muay Thai, and then he had this bet with Andrew Roble. He had made a very similar bet with Roble, And so he had trained for that bet for a few months, and then he had hurt his rib, and Andrew Roble had hurt himself, and then Roble, I think, was going to Macau to play some games, and he ended up canceling the fight and paying a penalty. So JC had made a little bit of money and had prepared, emotionally, psychologically to have this experience, but then was kind of let down, didn't get to have it. So I think he was particularly hungry to have this experience. A huge MMA fan, very passionate guy about the sport, really knowledgeable. And I was the opposite. Like I didn't even know who Conor McGregor was at the time. I had no knowledge of the sport, never been to an MMA gym or had any martial arts training. I had always wanted to learn how to fight. I think not that different from how 12, 15-year-old kids go to Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, at least when I was young, he was a star. And it was like, oh, this would be cool. It was like the part of our testosterone or sense of masculinity and anger and competitiveness and athletic, all that stuff. I always thought being able to fight would be cool, like learning how to properly fight. But at the same time, I also knew myself, and I knew that I had a lot of different interests in different things and maybe pursued them for a little while. I played the piano for a little while. I played the violin for a little while. I was into chess for a little while. I kind of touched on a lot of things, but I would just kind of stop them for whatever reason, get into something else. I wasn't really focused and committed into any one thing for a long period of time when I was younger. And so I thought having a big bet would kind of lock me in, force me to commit to this and not be able to back out or to pull out. So, over the next few weeks, JC and I started to negotiate. And because he was someone I knew, because I was familiar with him and my good friend helped me ask some questions that made me think that I could have a pretty good chance at winning. Like he had no wrestling background, for example. I was a bit bigger than him, and we were trying to offset his training experience with my weight advantage. So we were trying to look for a way to do that. We ended up coming up with a pretty significant weight advantage. I weighed over 20 pounds more than him, which was a lot.
Yeah.
That was a big advantage, I think. And then I also just got very, very lucky. I ended up, through this same friend, finding a gym, a head coach, and a fight team of a bunch of young, hungry, incredibly very, very sweet guys who were willing to help me learn and to motivate me and train with me. And so I ended up basically joining this gym in the Bronx and training every day. And then the trainer guy that I was talking about, he ended up being my strength and conditioning coach. And he was really, really good at that. So I was doing training in the morning, strength conditioning in the evening, poker in the afternoon. And that was my life for 6 months. We rented a professional gym in Las Vegas. We sold tickets and we streamed it on the internet, and we hired a referee and 3 judges. There was a medic on hand. We tried to do a proper MMA fight. We had full UFC rules, even though it was our first fight. It's pretty ridiculous now looking back. We did 5-minute rounds, which is absurd for your first fight. Like all amateur fights are 3-minute rounds.
How many rounds? How many rounds?
The negotiated fight was 4 rounds and a 5th if it was tied. Wow. But the doctor was the guy who was running the gym was so nervous about liability because by the end of the fight, JC was quite battered. And so at the end of the 3rd round, the head of the gym went to the medic, the doc, and he was like, yo, go in there and check on him and make sure he's okay. Because he thought the ref should have stopped the fight earlier. But JC's a very tough guy, and he was continuing to fight back. So after the 3rd round, 3 full 5-minute rounds, I was obviously just really exhausted.
I can imagine.
The medic went in, and the medic is the one who stopped the fight. He ended up just said, okay, it's over. And so we fought 3 full 5-minute rounds.
I'm already super exhausted after 12 minutes, man.
Oh my God. Yeah. After 2 minutes, it's exhausting. Are you doing jiu-jitsu?
No, just boxing and kickboxing, and I have a trainer that I do sparring with. He probably just does 10%, but it's a great feeling. It's just this challenge. I mean, it's just not only physically challenging, but also mentally. I really appreciate that experience.
Especially when you get tired. It's one thing when you're full of energy the first minute or two, and then when you get tired and the guy across from you is quite good or strong.
Yeah.
It's also sparring. I think is a completely different experience. If you just
100%.
If you just hit pads, go through exercises, like, you can kind of play the game a little bit, like, you're like in character. But when you actually spar, that's when someone is actually trying to hit you, or, that's
what I find so inspiring about it is, or I have so much respect for it, is I know our sparring, and it's light sparring, he just, sure. He's my coach, so he's playing with me. And now you do an MMA fight where it's full all in and you only have these light gloves.
I was very scared. I don't pretend like I was like gung-ho. I was very scared. But it was also the kind of thing where, again, because of the bet, it was 6 months before the fight that I like committed to it, So it was like, this is out for a long time, I committed to something, and as it gets closer and closer, I'm getting more and more scared. But I'm also training and preparing, and I felt like my training was quite good. And again, I also I wasn't fighting, like, he didn't have much experience, and because we had negotiated this weight difference, I really felt confident that I would do well, and so that helped me. That helped me be less scared. If I had made a mistake and was like, I'll fight this guy who has 3 MMA fights already, you know what I mean? Like someone who's like, and then as I got better and more knowledgeable, I understood that I made a mistake. Then I think I would have been much more nervous than I was. But because I continued to be confident that I would be successful and that I was well prepared, I was able to work through it. And again, because I felt locked into the experience, there was no backing out. Like I wasn't. That was just not. That was not an option to me. So because I felt like I didn't have a choice, I was like, okay, well, we have to do this now, so let's do it.
Have you done any similar prop bets or anything similar planned in the future?
No, I mean, I've toyed with the idea of fighting again. I think I would really, really enjoy the process of training a second time, knowing so much more what I know now. My physical conditioning is like very high now. I didn't used to fast back then. I fast now. I prepare 95% of my calories that I consume at home now. I probably at the time prepared 20%. So it's like I'm healthier. I eat cleaner. I have the experience. I think I'd be much better at it a second time around. But it's actually very, very hard to find a potential opponent because I obviously want to feel confident that I would do well. And now that people have seen this and people think that I would be pretty good a second time around, and also having the bet a decent amount of money to motivate me and to lock me in, I think is important. So there aren't that many good candidates for people. It's like, do I really want to challenge Jason Kuhn, who has a Golden Glove boxing background and is a really intense guy in great shape? Probably not. And whether he would be interested either is and it's that's the person I'm starting with. It's obviously there aren't a lot of great candidates out there. So also I'm getting close to 40 and I have my own back issues, to be honest, and I think the kind of marginal value of this experience, I think, would be decently diminished by having already done it once. I don't think I would get as much, even though I think I'd be better at it. I'm not sure I would get as much out of it doing it again. So sometimes I think that my inclination to do it again is actually coming from a bad part of me, or a part of me that's kind of that's not sure what my future is going to be like. So I'm trying to repeat something from my past. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of saying that was then, and instead I need to look forward and try to see what my future holds that is new, because and it's my unwillingness, the uncertainty, the kind of scariness of doing that I think inclines me sometimes to want to look back and repeat this experience, kind of live in my heyday a little bit. So oftentimes I'm disinclined to try to repeat that experience and try instead to look towards something different. And I would presume something not physically based. I'm very happy with how my nutritional and fitness and exercise kind of regimen is right now, and I just don't think that's something I need to develop or work on, or that is lacking or anything like that. I'm really good with that.
Well, how does it look like at the moment? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, well, obviously things are weird with coronavirus, so I don't go to the gym. But a couple years ago when I moved into this apartment, I had this formal dining room, and it was like a fancy table and chairs, and it was like for 3 months past, and I didn't use that room ever once. So what I did was I got rid of all that stuff. I put MMA mats on the floor. I hung Olympic rings from the ceiling, and I turned it into my own gym. Nice. So basically, yeah, I actually do a lot of stretching now because I'm struggling with back issues, and I think flexibility is really important, especially as you age. And so I stretch every day, and I have a core routine that I do. And then for strength, I got a weight vest, and I do weighted pull-ups and weighted dips from the rings.
Okay.
And I don't know if you ever heard of something called Grease Your Groove.
No.
But Grease Your Groove is an exercise technique to try to increase strength. So you take a strength exercise, let's just say pull-up. Okay. So for it to be considered strength, you can't be able to do that many reps. So let's just say with whatever weight it is, I can do 10 pull-ups. That's my max. Like 10, and then I fail. I can't do any more. So 10 is my max.
I was just thinking you can't do so many. I was like, he's probably going to say 3 or 4, but not 10.
Well, I mean, I've gotten pretty good at pull-ups, but I'm just saying as an example.
Yeah.
So let's just say whatever exercise it is. Let's say you can do 10 pull-ups. You do 10 sets. Well, I do 10. I think you can do probably 8 or 6 or whatever. But you do a bunch of sets throughout the day. Half of your max reps. So if you can do 10, you do 5 reps with minimum 5 minutes of rest between. And it can be more. So and that's it. That's the whole idea. But I've done it, and I started with a weight vest of like 20 or 25 pounds, and now I'm up to a weight vest of 45 pounds. So it's helped me, and I think it's a very good I think it's a technique good for increasing strength. If you can do more reps, I'm sure you'll make progress, but you just won't be doing strength, right? It's like there's a rep range for strength, then there's a rep range for what's called like hypertrophy, and then there's a higher rep range for endurance. It depends what you're trying to build. Yeah. I'm trying to build strength right now, so I put enough weight on the vest that I can't do that many. So that's what I'm doing. So dips and pull-ups, and that's it. And then I also got some kettlebells, and I've started to do something called a Turkish get-up, which is it's a movement, a multi-movement exercise with a kettlebell that you can like Google. It's a really good movement. It puts some strain on my back, so I have to be careful. But it's really good for mobility and what I think is really important, which is functional strength.
Yeah.
Right? Some people can go into the gym and they can like lift heavy weights, but they have a good aesthetic, but it's not functional. If they do jujitsu or if they play sports or if in everyday life, they don't have the same kind of strength that somebody else who has really good core functional strength has. I think functional strength is more interesting to me, so I'm trying to develop that a bit more.
So you're doing these 10 sets throughout the entire day?
Yeah, so I wake up, I do a set. I walk my dog, I do another set. I do the dishes, I do another set. I stretch, I do another set. That's 4. I go up and study for a couple hours. I come back, do a set, walk my dog, do a set, do my core routine, do a set. That's 7. I eat, I prepare food and eat. Then I play poker. Then I do a set, walk my dog, do a set, stretch, do a set, eat dinner. And so I've done 10 sets. Then I play poker again, and then it's 10 o'clock at night. And that's my day. And then I get into bed. I study chess or I read, and then I go to sleep. That's every single 7 days a week. That is my day every day. So I'm able to structure 10 sets in that way, and it's relatively easy. It's 4, 3, and 3 with at least 5 minutes in between.
Yeah.
And it's good. And I alternate pull-ups, then dips, then Turkish get-ups, pull-ups, dips, Turkish get-ups, day off.
What is Turkish get-up?
So Turkish get-up is a movement with the kettlebell. So you start on the floor, you push it up, you get on your elbow, then you get on your hand, and then you eventually stand up, and then you go all the way down.
Okay.
If you Google it, it shows you. It's important to have good technique.
Yeah.
So you start out with little weight, but it works your whole body. It's good again for functional strength and mobility. It's a good movement. But for me specifically, it puts a bit of strain on my back, so I have to be careful. My back I have a bunch of herniated discs over time, so I'm trying to deal with that.
Are you not missing diversity in your workout if you only do these 3 routines?
Yeah, I mean a little bit, but I'm trying to make the best out of the situation we're in.
Okay.
So
But
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do this like just going
okay.
forward. Like when the gyms open up, I'll go start going back to the gym. I started to play tennis again as things have opened up a little bit. Also do some biking. I do a little bit of jogging, of like running outside. Not so much, but I also do a lot of walking because I walk with my dog.
Yeah.
We take 30-minute walks a day. So I probably walk 2 or 3 miles every day. That's another thing, by the way, which I think people underestimate is how important vitamin D is. I think a lot of people who play poker for a living, they end up not spending enough time outside.
Yeah.
I think being outside is like one of the core things you can do to make yourself feel better, but especially getting some sun on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Just like if the first thing you did was wake up and go for a walk for 15 or 20 minutes every day, I think that would improve a lot of people's quality of life by itself.
Yeah.
I think people underestimate how important being outside is and getting sunlight is on a regular basis. So that's one thing that my dog provides for me. She's like a forcing mechanism, like the vet. She forces me outside every day, as a part of my routine. It's actually part of what helps me create a structure. Is that structure is good for her. She eats at the same time, walks at the same time, that kind of stuff. So it's good for me to have that.
You mentioned you mentioned fasting earlier. So
Yeah.
how does it help you? Has it improved your fitness, maybe even mindset wise?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, you told me that you fasted too, so I'm interested in how fasting has helped you. For me, I think it's sometimes hard to like source things to other things necessarily. You know what I mean? The cause and effect. Like, I don't know if necessarily fasting is the thing that has made all these benefits, but you know, I ever since I started fasting, I feel like I have more energy and I feel clearer in my head. I don't have as much of that kind of fog that I get sometimes. I also feel like I'm stronger, or at least as strong, and I for sure shred some body fat. I'm pretty shredded now. Like, I mean, with my diet and my workouts.
Yeah, I've seen a picture on Twitter, man. That looked.
Well, but it's honestly, it's more and more, man. It's more and more, especially now with the COVID. All I do is prepare my own food, so I eat really clean. Like I'm just fasting. I think helps, but it's it's a continual progression. And I like fasting. For one, I think it makes me appreciate food more because I go a long time without food, and then I cannot wait for food.
That's true.
I'm so excited for food. I really appreciate its subtle tastes and textures, and I really appreciate food in a new way. And I think longer term fasts, I think, are really good for, at least for me psychologically, because they serve as a reset.
Yeah.
I'm able to just it's a kind of, you try to detoxify, get rid of the buildup of whatever. But I also find it as a good kind of, as a good kind of reset. Also, I think, there's this idea of stress, right? This is what you were saying before about challenging yourself. I think part of the culture that we have of having so much luxury and, so many new things, products coming out that kind of increase our convenience and all that stuff. It's like, it's a lot of it is pointed to kind of make us struggle less, live less stress, just have an easier, kind of more comfortable life. And I think the truth is, a lot of people have said this, but the truth is that I think a certain amount of stress is good.
Yeah.
Right? This is how our immune system works, right? That's why if you deprive a child of any germs, that child's immune system will become very weak, right? It's like our immune system develops by being exposed. This is how antibiotics work, right? You expose it to a low level and then it creates antibodies. That's how vaccines work, right? This is how muscle builds, right? You don't completely tear your muscle off the bone, but you tear your muscle and then it rebuilds itself stronger.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of, this concept of anti-fragility that, Taleb, the author, has coined, I think is really important. And this is part of what is important to realize about yourself, is that if you stress yourself, in a regulated, reasonable way, you can obviously overstress yourself. That's obvious. But if you stress yourself to an extent, it challenges you, it builds you up stronger, it makes you better, it makes you grow. I think that's true emotionally. I think that's true physically. I think it's true in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I think fasting is, that's part of the concept, right, behind fasting, is that you stress your body, and then it's not the fasting necessarily that has all the health benefits, but it's the refeeding, it's the repairing that happens afterwards.
Yeah.
So, I think part of my experience with fasting is a little bit of faith. I take it on faith that it works. I don't necessarily know that it works, but I do have some experience that I think backs it up, and other people's experiences. Like I'm happy to. I'm interested to hear from you.
Yeah, as I told you, I got inspired from my parents, and very often if I see people that I look up to or that I trust, and it works for them, that I tend to, instead of reading 10 books about it, I go ahead and try. I see so many people, yes, plan and structure is good, but then you also have the people that they plan everything, have great structure, plan everything, but they never try. And I just go ahead and try. If I see it works out to me, then great. And fasting, man, after 3-4 days, I was able to, with no food, I've been working like laser focus. Yeah. It's insane.
You almost get to a point where you don't want food anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And the hardest part was in the evenings, when I was not occupied with my work or something else. But apart from that, after the third day, it actually was not that difficult anymore. And the last, I think it was even 10 days. I fasted for 10 days. Wow. And the last days, it was really not that difficult. However, I think someone told me, and then I was reading a little bit about it. He said that 5 days is the sweet spot. It's really the most benefits, also health-wise, and getting rid of the parasites and cleansing your body is like really around 5 days. Of course, you can go longer for the mental challenge, but if you really, for the purpose of the reset, for healing and cleaning your body, it's 5 days is sufficient, and then it doesn't have such huge impact anymore. So I rather do 2-3 times a year with 5 days each instead of doing this 1 10-day fasting a year.
I've heard the same thing, and I have the same exact approach. Did you lose a lot of weight when you fasted? I mean, I'm sure you gained some of it back.
Yeah, around 5-6 kilos, I would say I lost. Yeah. And also what you mentioned about the stress, when I think about meditation, is when you start meditation, very often with all the information overload that we are currently exposed to, and we always feel like we need to do something and release some dopamines and getting this dopamine kick. When I started meditation, it felt like stress to me. Just sitting there for 15 minutes in silence, not doing anything. You got nervous. You're like, what? I'm not doing anything. That's what not my mind was used to. Especially when you play hyper-turbo sit-and goes, where you have so much action, all ins. Cards being that new card, new situation, and then social media, phones, Facebook, it just was everywhere. Yeah. And when I started meditating, it was at the beginning was painful. And was stress. And now I remember when you brought it up that very often actually, in order to heal something, it's a little bit of a stress at the beginning. It's a little bit of a discomfort. It's a little bit of pain that you need to go through to get this healing process going. And I had many people that stopped meditating because they didn't really see progress, but I think you just need to give it some time, especially with meditation. Or you can also go for a very mindful walk every day. I mean, meditation is not only sitting there for 20 minutes in silence. It could also be cooking a meal and just being very mindful, right? So whatever works for you, just try it out.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, is that meditation is supposed to be, at least the way I understand it, mindfulness meditation is supposed to be a time that you dedicate to like living or like being completely present and not kind of living in the chatter-filled chaos of your mind. And like, you're right, you can do that. You could be driving or walking or cooking or stretching or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Guided meditations, can be very helpful. And just taking that time, setting it aside and dedicating it to this purpose, obviously is can be quite helpful.
Yeah.
But I also find that once you meditate, you're able to kind of take the essence of that practice and then just like you're saying, just apply it to whatever it is that you're doing, and you just get better. You get better. Like sometimes when I'm driving, a lot of times when I'm driving, I'm just lost somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm in my head, I'm whatever. But sometimes, when I'm trying to be, deliberate about it, I'm just everything that I'm doing, like the way I hold the steering wheel, like my foot on the pedal, like my body against the seat. I'm just focusing on these sensations and just everything, trying to be completely in the moment, in exactly what I'm doing. And it's actually it's just a wonderful feeling, right? I remember hearing this like very like simple line, which was that like depression is about the past and anxiety is about the future. And this is about this mode of your mind, right? Where your mind is in this mode, focusing on something either that's happened before or that could, something you're anticipating could happen in the future. And it's if you can find that place in the middle, that place of peace, which is the present moment, which is, at this point, it's a bit cliche. I mean, you hear that everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's cliche for a reason. I mean, it's like there's real value there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And it has, at least for me, because very often it's essentially the way you're sitting in the car. You mentioned it when we start tilting, because we get lost, right? Like we're somewhere lost in thoughts, lost in, I don't know, entitlement or whatever it is.
Previous hands.
And then we start tilting. But when you practice meditation, you get better in realizing what is going on and detach yourself and zoom out and realize, oh, all right, here we go. It's about to happen. And, more often you're going to be able to avoid tilt. That's how I could see it. And the way actually I saw the progress in meditation was when I wasn't meditating for 3 or 4 days, that I realized I got more anxious. I got more nervous. Not even while I was playing, but also in my everyday. It's like I haven't had this inner peace, this inner calm that I have when I meditate on a regular basis.
Yeah, this conversation is actually motivating me because I haven't been that good lately, and I need to be better. So
better at what?
I'm glad we had this conversation because it's motivating me to just be better in general. I mean, meditation as one part of it, but just in general. I need to be. It's good. It's good I think it's also good to just reset and get new kind of sources of motivation.
One last question before we're gonna wrap it up.
Sure.
What's your golden piece of advice for young aspiring poker players that, if you look back into your entire career, maybe something you would have done differently, and you see young players doing wrong in these days, or even established poker players that you would like to share?
Be part of a community if you can.
Okay.
I think I think part of the appeal for me for poker originally was a little bit of the lone wolf aspect to it, to be honest. It was that like I didn't have to answer to anyone. I was also completely responsible for everything, right? So it was like, if I did well, I mean, obviously there's variance, but like after you could control for variance, it's like my success was entirely a product of my own decision making, my own preparation, my own, I was responsible. But I think I became a bit too enamored with this me against the world, lone wolf kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been better for me, and I think it's really important, as we've already talked about, for people to try to make the effort to create some sort of social network, some sort of community, other people based to bounce ideas off of, to have as a support system when things aren't going well. And also, like, when you are the support system for someone else, that is a part of your poker experience that I think is important. It helps round out your experience. If you're completely consumed by your own wins and losses, there's a self-centeredness to that experience that is just not ideal. When you can be happy for someone else's successes, when you can help someone else when they're not doing well, that kind of rounds out your experience in, I think, a more holistic and more healthy way. So I think if you can be a part of a community and create that kind of interpersonal connection with other people experiencing the same thing as you, I think you'll make your experience better, and you'll have a better chance of maximizing your own potential.
Yeah, for sure. Great. That was golden.
Yeah, man. Thanks
Olivier,
for having me.
thank you so much. I think not only me, but also our entire community and everyone else who is just maybe discovering poker or has discovered the channel is gonna appreciate the value that you have been contributing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, man, it was a pleasure. I'm sorry if I went a little long.
Oh no, man! Like it's great. I can talk about this kind of stuff for like the entire day. It's very inspiring.
I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate getting to know you a bit too. I really do. I think it's like I said, I listened to your podcast, the last episode. I thought it was great, and Raise Your Edge sounds like a great community that you've built. So good for you, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You got it.